Okay, let's go ahead and get going. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. I hope everyone's safe and healthy. We have with us today our partners and colleagues from all over the world. Some 200 people have registered for this event from the US, Israel, Brazil, Japan, the UK, Austria, and elsewhere. I'm William Altman, Senior Analyst at the Global Cyber Center operated by SOSA. SOSA is an open innovation company. We work with multinational corporations and governments, and we develop and execute tailored innovation strategies. And these strategies lead to buying, partnering, and investing in the right startups and new technologies. Our clients say we're like a radar system for seeing what's coming next in their industry. In 2018, SOSA was chosen by the City of New York's Economic Development Corporation to launch and operate the city's official global cyber center. The state-of-the-art center in Chelsea brings together an international community of corporations, investors, startups, and talent to foster collaboration and partnerships within New York City's growing cybersecurity ecosystem. And today, we're excited to announce that the Global Cyber Center has partnered with C5 Capital's Cyber Alliance to defend our healthcare. To serve as an official partner in the alliance, we'll be sourcing advanced technologies to help defend global healthcare. Since launching the alliance in March to provide free cybersecurity support to healthcare organizations, C5 Capital has noted a tenfold increase in cyber attacks such as ransomware and more on the sector, adding an additional threat to an already overburdened hospitals, clinics, and research facilities. Through collective defense, members of the Alliance are working together to protect healthcare workers on the front lines of this epidemic. If you're interested in joining the Alliance, or if you just want to learn more, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. And I know that we have a few CISOs and from health networks on the call today. If any of you would like to reach out and to share some of your various cyber pain points with us during this time, we'd be happy to hear you and to see how we can help. Now, we've put together this demo day based on our partners' requests and their strategies with regard to their current needs, but also as they start to navigate the new normal. Our partners have said that they're seeing an increased demand for digital and remote healthcare capabilities at a rapid pace and on a global scale. And this pandemic will almost probably be remembered as one of the major catalysts for the adoption of digital healthcare and specifically telemedicine. And in this time, navigating the intersection between digital health and digital security is essential. In the words of US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just in April, as the world battles the COVID-19 pandemic, malicious cyber activity that impairs the ability of hospitals and healthcare systems to deliver critical services could have deadly results. Since March, we've seen the US Health and Human Services Department suffer a cyber attack on its computer system, which was part of what people familiar with the incident call the campaign of disruption and disinformation that was aimed at undermining the response to the coronavirus pandemic and may have been the work of a foreign actor. According to reporting by Christian Ruhl, in the early morning of March 14th, the public announcement system of the Brno Hospital in the Czech Republic broadcast an urgent message to all staff: shut down your computers. As physicians and other healthcare workers responded to the coronavirus pandemic, the hospital was hit by a cyber attack. Brno, which houses one of the country's biggest COVID-19 testing facilities, had to take its entire IT system offline, cancel surgeries, and move patients to other hospitals. In response, we've seen a bipartisan group of senators write to top US cybersecurity officials, asking them to step up monitoring, warnings, and if needed, counterstrikes against a host of foreign actors that are targeting the US healthcare system and pharmaceutical companies through cyber attacks. So, in summary, the threat against our healthcare is real and the time to act is now. Today, we're going to hear from 3 cybersecurity companies that are at the forefront of securing the future of our healthcare. All 3 companies will give a 15-minute presentation, and they're going to share how they're experiencing the current times and describe their unique solution and how it helps deal with some aspects of the current crisis. Each company will present, and you can submit questions using the Q&A button as we go. So, Without further ado, let's hear from our first startup. First up, we've got Mike Fleck, the Vice President of Identity Protection at 4IQ. Mike, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, William.
Good morning, everyone. This is Doug Dangermont. I'm actually joining Mike as a Senior Vice President for 4IQ. And as Mike starts to pull up these slides, I just want to say, I guess, good morning, afternoon, evening, depending where you are, because I know this is a global audience. And I also want to say thank you to SOSA and C5 for hosting this event. Important to take the time away from all your business. I know you're all very busy, so we want to make sure that this is impactful and valuable to you. And I look forward to talking a little bit more about what we do and how we might be able to help and some of the things that are happening, and also some of the other fantastic companies that are online today to talk to you. So, Mike, want to do some introductions? I guess I'll introduce myself first as a Senior Vice President for 4IQ. A little bit of background: I've been in this business for over 30 years, network and security based. Probably the most relevant is for over the last 10 years, I've been very centered on open source threat intelligence and doing that type of work for companies in both commercial and government segments. So, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So my name is Mike Fleck. I've been in technology for, these days longer than I care to admit, and got gray hair to prove it. So kind of a mix of technical and business backgrounds, claim to fame. I've got a patent floating out there for transparent encryption of web objects that a buddy of mine used as the basis for a company as enterprises were moving to the cloud.
Very good. Well, as you just heard a few minutes ago from William, the cybercrime is not new to anyone on this call, but is increasing rapidly. It's almost 10x. Top of mind, COVID right now, and all the challenges that are associated both personally and professionally with that. But what we know is that criminals thrive on chaos. And so what we're seeing right now is massive increases in phishing campaigns around fake websites and statistics and information that people are clamoring for. Ransomware, examples of coronavirus, which are targeting the Microsoft utilities, and COVID lock, which is mobile applications for ransomware. Just today, there was an article in the Business Insider about fake news and disinformation around the opening of the communities, and why that was good and or bad. And so there's a lot of disinformation around all of this as well that's all difficult to cut through. And so this is really not anything new for many of you who are security practitioners, are always dealing with this. But what we have seen is a massive increase in this, again, because everybody's searching for information, they're scared, and those are opportunities for criminals to take advantage of that. So, Mike?
Yeah, Doug, I think, the folks that were doing these types of things all along now basically just have more time to do it because they're sheltering in place, right? I don't think that that catches anybody by surprise.
Even with the increases in telemedicine that was referenced in digital healthcare, I think it becomes more pervasive that we're now doing things in the digital world, and that's going to be more of a challenge going forward. But it'll probably be something that continues even past sort of this COVID event. And so with that, Mike, maybe you could talk a little bit more about 4IQ, identity intelligence, and what that means in this new digital world, if you will.
Yeah, thanks for that, Doug. So, 4IQ tagline, right? We call ourselves an identity intelligence company. And which begs the question, so what does that mean? And it's our way of differentiating ourselves in kind of the threat intelligence space. So if you're familiar with the threat intelligence space, there's all kinds of different threat intelligence, right? It could be based on geopolitical world events, could be based on specific threat actors, advanced persistent threats, those kinds of things. So 4IQ is unique in the space in that we focus exclusively on collecting exposed identity information and sort of intelligence around that, and sort of the fraud and things like that exposed identity data fuels. And then the point of that is then you can use that in sort of both defensive purposes to kind of remediate exposures, ideally before the attackers are able to leverage them into a successful attack, And also on the offensive standpoint, to do some things to actually investigate some of the things that might be happening to you, so you can better sort of shut down attacks. And I mean offensive in a very specific way. I don't mean it in a strike back way. I mean it in more of an investigative, let's figure out who this is way, because effectively what happens once somebody figures out how to antagonize you, if you will, it's just easier for them to keep doing that than it is for them to move on and learn a different target. So generally, folks eventually find the only way to stop these people is to figure out who they are, and then get law enforcement interested in doing something so that they go away for longer than just a few minutes. And the 4 and 4 IQ comes from the areas where we look for data, right? So we've probably all seen this iceberg associated with the dark web. We can argue the size of the iceberg, right, and how much of it is underwater or not. I actually don't think that matters. The point is, there's information in multiple spots. You have to look in all these places for this kind of information, this identity intelligence that we collect. So you have to look on the surface web, which is kind of the internet that we know and love and use our browser to connect to. Accidental spills are more of what I would call sort of the deep web. It's kind of the unindexed internet. So this might be Mongo databases that somebody has migrated into the cloud, and as often happens, to figure out how to connect to it, they just remove all the security, right? And then forget to actually lock it back down. So we see a lot of exposed data that way, especially in the healthcare environment. Or I should say healthcare data. Don't necessarily know that it's covered entities or healthcare providers that are doing it. You've hackers, those types of things, folks who are exposing data, leaking information, based on a specific motivation. And then finally, the dark web, where you have these marketplaces and these chat rooms and these restricted and semi-restricted forums and things like that. And honestly, of all of these sources, that last one at the bottom is where we spend most of our time, because what we want to do is get this information as soon as possible, right? Or as soon after it's been exfiltrated from the company as possible. And the thought process behind that is the fresher the data is, the more impactful it is, right? Because it's less widely publicized. So we're really spending most of our time in sort of the darkest corners of this, trying to get that really fresh exposure data that most people don't know is out there and available. Again, just because we believe that that's highest impact. We are looking at all these places all the time, and you do have to use sort of a combination of automated, infrastructure, things like that, and then just plain old human intelligence, right? And people interacting with people on the dark web to get this. And what we do every year, right? So we collect all this information, then every year we put out an annual report, just sort of the trends we see, how much data we collected, those kinds of things. So Doug and I just wanted to take this time we have today to walk through that, right? It's just generally some, I think, interesting and educational information. So last year, we discovered, or we collected about 19 billion raw identity records, just out there in these different sources. So, okay, what's a raw identity record? It basically is, what we found as people sort of claimed it, right? So raw is sort of before we look at it, before we determine whether it's real or not, before we deduplicate data, all these different things that we do to curate this information. Because, for whatever the use case might be for this intelligence, it's a garbage in, garbage out kind of hypothesis, right? So you want to have good data feeding, these processes and providing the solution rather than a bunch of, potentially fake and duplicate data. So by the time we clean it up and things like that, you can see, 19 billion records goes down to about 4 billion, new authentic records. So there is a lot of, just, it doesn't even have to be fake information. There's just a lot of old information out there, right? People might take the breach package from LinkedIn and be saying it's from Equifax. And, you have to look at it and decide that it's absolutely not. And for what it's worth, that 4 billion records. It was sourced from about 12,500-ish breach packages, right? And a breach package is the data that turns up that's actually exfiltrated from the company. So not all breaches that you hear about will result in a breach package being available. But conversely, a lot of breaches you don't find out about are the data from those is circulated out there, and we're able to get our hands on it. And it's certainly a global issue. So, in years past, people would look at this and think that, well, really, it's only sort of a, Anglo/Western developed world kind of problem. But the fact is, and sort of anecdotally in tracking this and looking at our reports year over year, it certainly follows GDP, right? So the larger the economy, the more breaches your region is going to have to deal with. But then it also follows developing economies. So your BRICS, right? India, China, Brazil, Russia, sort of in that order, were the population's most affected, or the organizations most affected by data breaches, right? So it's kind of the age-old saying, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is, right? These types of things are going to follow where people think they can get data, commit fraud, and ultimately make money. Right.
Hey, Mike, this is really interesting. And, I know we've just completed and released our new breach report, which everyone can sort of get a copy of. There's a lot of data inside of it, and maybe some valuable insights into what's happening. But also, can you explain or talk to everyone about how this impacts and, it manifests into security problems for everyone?
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, and admittedly, I mean, so the last couple of slides I think are good, sort of cocktail party fodder when we're able to go to cocktail parties again. But yeah, it does matter. I mean, to your question or to your point, and I'd say, those of us who have spent a fair amount of time in security might even be a little jaded about, great, there are data breaches. We all know that, we're trying to stop them, but it's, hard and all the cliches about that, right? So, so what, right? So, the so what factor here is there's a lot of different kind of information exposed, and that information is used in increasingly novel ways for people to attack organizations, attack employees, attack consumers, attack supply chains, you know it. Right, so a breach of an organization that you wouldn't even think relates to you somehow might, in fact, the data from that breach might, in fact, be used to fuel some sort of attack, maybe a credential stuffing attack on your infrastructure, on your supply chain for people trying to break into their environment, right? Or some of this data being used for social engineering, maybe the call center. Of somebody that you've outsourced some sort of payment processing to, right? So just because an organization that isn't in your industry and you haven't heard about has a breach doesn't mean it can't down the road impact you. And in fact, we're seeing a very long tail on this data. Interestingly, from a 4IQ standpoint, we've also found ways to use this data, right, to combat these things. So we have, organizations, across industries, government agencies, those kinds of things, using this information to sort of, protect identities, to sort of get sort of a version of sort of third-party risk their employees, right, to get some insights and get some ways to proactively respond to things that their employees are doing, outside of the purview of the organization's, security controls. And in fact, we have a product called ID Hunt where we can use this information to effectively do link analysis, again, to start to unveil the bad actors who might be doing these attacks and those kinds of things. Which gets really interesting, and most people don't think that they want to get into investigations, but the reality is there are use cases for it, and sometimes you have to, right? You mentioned ransomware. If you keep getting hit with a ransomware attack, sooner or later, the only way to make that attacker stop is to figure out who they are and get law enforcement interested in chasing them down.
So Bad news is all of our data is in these breach reports. Good news is that the bad guys' information is in there too, right?
Yeah. I tell our head of marketing, I love that report because it's so interesting, and I hate that report because it just reminds us of,
That's scary.
how big a problem is. And this is another thing that stood out, from me. And I think it's both sort of, again, cocktail party fodder. It's both shocking, but then also really gets your brain going on the types of things that can be going on. So again, we're seeing nothing but an increase year over year in these breaches and the amount of data. And here with the verifications.io breach, the number of sort of attributes about people that are being tracked and in turn leaked, right, with these marketing aggregators and consumer reporting bureaus, things like that. So, there's a lot of words on this slide, but, verifications data set showed up about a year ago, so 750 million records. And the data structure of this breach package had 134 fields. I mean, so it didn't just have, your name, your email address, date of birth, your traditional PII. It had all kinds of household information, what kind of appliances you had, what kind of cars you had, how long you've had them, all these things. We saw very similar in the Experian website breach from about 3 years ago. Right. So you can start to see the picture that these people are able to paint of employees, of consumers, and the types of things that they can do to create synthetic identities. You name it, right? You name it, they'll think of it. And to your point on the second or third slide, they got more free time to think about it than they had 4 months ago.
And I read an interesting study from Javelin where they're actually talking about how threat actors are now attacking a more comprehensive approach versus skimming. So in the past, it might have been go hit 20 different accounts and then move on from each of those accounts. And now it's building a profile and really attacking an account, not just from the savings account, the checking account, or the business, from all aspects of it. So they're going, I guess, deeper as opposed to just the surface kind of attacks that we've seen historically.
Yeah, crazy. The vertical integration of attacks, right? And, there's something else about these. There is, again, the point of all this, there's a long tail to this breach data. So it doesn't, verifications.io wouldn't necessarily have password information because they're more of a data aggregator, data collector. But we are certainly seeing breach packages show up that might have password data. Those passwords are all encrypted as they should be, right, within the infrastructure. But then some number of months later, anywhere from 9 months to sort of 3 years later, a subset of that breach package will show up, which is just the usernames and passwords associated with that website, right? And we observed a pretty big increase in that kind of activity. And this really, in my mind, strikes at just the heart of an existing problem, which is account takeover, right?
And interesting that the account takeover side of it, right, is we're seeing so much still behaviorally of people using the same passwords in their private and personal life as they do at work. So personally, when they get breached at Target, the company is actually breached at the same time because now that threat actor knows how to get into the potential company environment or domain, right?
Yeah. And that's conceptually, that's a trend that we probably all saw with bring your own device and things. We're just this fusion, especially now with telecommuting and all these things, this fusion of our personal devices and our personal life and our work life. And attackers are definitely leveraged that with these exposed passwords, right? Yeah, the fact that people reuse passwords across work and personal accounts, the fact that they have weak or predictable passwords like Broncos 2019 and 2019, and then Broncos 2020 and 2020. And probably by now everybody here has read the context of the slide, but a 2/3 or 67% increase in the number of passwords circulating out there. And again, some of that growth can be attributed to a single package, which is a giant number of passwords, right? So it's definitely, it was definitely one of the more memorable trends of 2019. And when you combine the fact that you have this password data out there with this increased sort of picture of all of your customers and your employees' lives, you can start to combine those things in some really interesting ways, right? So we've already mentioned account takeover attacks. Sorry, it's early. So that's something where there's multiple different ways that attackers can do a successful account takeover attack, right? You can take those exposed passwords and just effectively load them into a password cannon and shoot those passwords at a login portal. That's called a credential stuffing attack. And these are very sophisticated, right? Where they'll use a botnet, a network of compromised machines to slowly do this. So you can't really, detect that they're testing these passwords, and then they'll figure out which passwords work and then kind of regroup and start logging in and taking over those accounts. And that gets really interesting because from the user of the account, you say, oh my gosh, somebody broke into my account, and it's immediately the organization's issue, right? The user doesn't first think, oh, well, I must have been doing poor things with my password habits, and that led somebody to be able to log into this account, right? It's not really how that thought process works.
Yeah, they always blame the company or the hospital or the healthcare provider for the breach, right? It's never their fault.
Yeah, and they can use the other. And there's the harder to detect things, right? Like the social engineering tags, like the creation of synthetic identities to do new account fraud and those kinds of things.
So we only have about a minute left, Mike. So
hey guys. Yeah, thanks,
Doug
and Mike. Just to keep on schedule, I wanted to let you know we got a bunch of questions coming in from the audience.
Okay, great.
If you guys have a sort of a wrap up, and then we can do a question, or do you want to go right into the questions? I'll leave it up.
Yeah, we've got one more important slide to cover. Yeah, so thanks. So big problem. We'll sort of skip that in the interest of time. So William, you talked about this collective, if you will. What are the things that 4IQ is doing as part of this collective, and then as part just to sort of do our part in these very sort of challenging and interesting times, is offering sort of what we call domain monitoring. So free domain monitoring for organizations in the healthcare industry. What that does is we basically monitor for exposed passwords, exposed identity information, those kinds of things. That can be attributed to your organization. And by attributed to, I mean passwords and identity information of your employees, things like that, not necessarily breaches that can be attributed to you, although that would likely surface as well. So we'd like everybody, to take advantage of that. Quickest way to do that is just shoot us an email at healthcarewatch@4iq.com. But you also have a URL there.
Awesome, guys. Now, I'm getting a question from the audience here. It says, can you give me a real-world example of how the Healthcare Watch program has helped an organization? If you guys want to answer that one.
Sure. Doug, you want to take that, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah. So Mike, you can layer into it, but basically when we're watching the domains, we're looking for the breach information. What we've been able to do for at least one of the healthcare organizations as an example was we spotted that there was breach information out there that contained sensitive password credentials for them specifically. We were alerting them, and what they were able to do is then go in and do resets on some of those accounts, so that those passwords, even though they had not been exploited as of yet, they proactively were able to go and have those accounts changing passwords so that they were not in the exposed realm anymore, if you will. And so even though that was pretty immediate in terms of the breach packages, it hadn't been monetized and weaponized yet. So they were able to actually protect themselves before they got hit with it. And that actually helps protect the ecosystem as well, because what happens is that minimizes the value of that breach package, because as they try to weaponize it, they realize it's already been protected or countered, and therefore the value of that quickly goes down, and that starts to monetize a cost, if you will, on the threat actor side, which is another way that we help prevent attacks, because the more costly it is for them to do it, the less likely they are to do those things often.
Okay, great. Good to know. Well, thank you guys. A very enlightening presentation on the severity of the credential threat facing a lot of industries, including healthcare. We'll go ahead and ask you guys to stop your screen share and turn your videos off. And we're now going to hand the stage over to Jeffrey the Vice President of Sales and Customer Success at Mostly AI. So, Jeffrey, the stage is yours.
Thank you, William. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I turned on my camera, so we're good to go?
You're good to go.
Awesome, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, depending on where you're dialed in from. Mostly AI empowers healthcare organizations to create synthetic patient records and healthcare data. But why would you need synthetic patients when you already have real ones? To help answer this question, let's look at anonymous cell phone location data. Here's a close-up of Beverly Hills. It contains thousands of location data points. There's no identifiable information here like names or social security numbers or email addresses, right? So this data is considered anonymous. Now, we all know companies and apps on our phones track our location data, and they justify it in 3 ways. Cell phone companies have this data because we consent when we use our phones, right? Which most of us do when we use one of their apps. Second, they tell us the data they collect is secure. And third, they say the data is completely anonymous. And as it turns out, this is a total lie. As I'm about to demonstrate, it doesn't take much effort to connect the real names to the dots. There's a New York Times article. There's a New York Times article that shows exactly what I'm talking about, which you might have read. It's called 12 Million Phones, One Data Set, Zero Privacy. It's an amazing article, and you've got to see what they uncovered. So first, it starts with about 10,000 plus smartphones that are tracked in Central Park over a given period of time. And when you remove all the phones but one, we're left with this, a single person isolated from the crowd. Next, this map shows all the pings from that single phone over a given time period. And when we connect all these pings, it reveals exactly where this person traveled and when. One of these people ended up on a beachfront property in SoCal. Another, we learned, was working at the Pentagon. Talk about a major security fail there. Pings were even picked up by people that frequented the White House. So after reviewing the location data of hundreds of people, this article breaks down how easy it was to re-identify individuals from quote unquote anonymous phone location data. By looking at one data point while someone's at work and another when they're at home at night, and a quick search in like the yellow pages or on LinkedIn, right, to verify employer, they were able to re-identify practically anyone they wanted to. Now, if a reporter could re-identify someone that works at the Pentagon, imagine what a criminal with negative intentions could accomplish. This is a very serious and real-life example, but the same concept holds true with all data sets, right? Even if no location data is available. The same thing can be accomplished with your health records that are classically anonymized, but the bottom line here is this. There really is no such thing as anonymous data. After serving as in-house counsel and director of compliance for a major hospital and supporting dozens of organizations over my career, I've seen an increased focus and investment in 3 areas of cybersecurity, and I'm sure you have too. And Mike and Doug just touched on one of these, right? These verticals are data protection, digital identity, and security operations. Most organizations are investing in these 3 pillars to improve their security posture. And data protection is arguably the most important one. For most organizations, regardless of if you're in healthcare, finance, or really any industry for that matter, the most significant impacts around cybersecurity revolve around data. But in healthcare, your data is more sensitive than most. We're dealing with things like electronic health records, personal health information, sometimes intellectual property, various forms of PII, and of course, HIPAA compliance. So it's safe to say we're all struggling to provide access to this data to reduce costs, to improve patient outcomes, to build better products, and increase margin, while also reducing risk. And that's a lot to handle, and a big reason why data protection is the most important pillar of your cybersecurity posture. So moving back to the original question from the beginning, why on earth are healthcare organizations generating synthetic data? The answer can be found in a challenge we all deal with, the data privacy versus data utility trade-off. Here, you can think of the images or data as interchangeable. So the raw data or image all the way to the left It's extremely useful, right? But offers no privacy. And the more noise we add to the data or the image, the more private, but less useful it naturally becomes. The same rule holds true for electronic health records and privacy-sensitive data. In order to protect privacy, we must eliminate information, which is bad if we want to conduct machine learning, AI training, or analytics. So even if we mask half this man's face, we still know who it is. And the more information we remove from the patient chart on the right, the less useful it becomes. There's a spectrum and challenge of balancing data utility and data privacy. It isn't until we completely anonymize or mask his entire face that he becomes truly private. But at this point, we've completely ruined the value of the data. The same holds true with the health record on the right. Once we eliminate all details, regardless of if it's personally identifiable information or not, this patient data becomes useless. But here's the scary part. And this is way, way, way worse. And it shows how easy it is to re-identify your customers, your members, and your patients, even after destroying so much information, which can put your organization at regulatory, reputational, and financial risk. So similar to cell phone location data, 87% of people can be re-identified simply with 3 factors. So even if your name, your street address, and your social security number are hidden or removed, date of birth, sex, and zip code give your identity away. And this number jumps to 99% if you add just 12 other data points, which is easily found in any patient record or Facebook quiz. So even if all PHI is removed, there's plenty of other non-privacy sensitive data remaining, which will be used to re-identify your members. And that's crazy, isn't it? 87% of us here on this call can be re-identified without any other information except date of birth, sex, and zip code. Let that sink in. And because this isn't considered PII or bound by compliance regulations, this information is often left unmasked, which can be used to re-identify your members, your patients, and your customers. And as we saw before, even if cell phone data is anonymized, people can easily be re-identified, which is proving controversial today with the current spread of COVID-19 and contact tracing. And this leads into what I was about to share, that the mass media is picking up on this privacy issue, explaining there really is no such thing as anonymous data. And this is becoming widely known by the greater population, right? As you've probably seen in the news, awareness for this problem is at an all-time high. Netflix canceled their recommendation contest because of a privacy lawsuit. And as the New York Times just showed us, how easy it really is to re-identify your data even after it's been anonymized. So simply put, classical anonymization fails for big data. Our organizations are collecting more data than ever before, but because of privacy and security concerns, we're all handcuffed and unable to take advantage of this untapped resource. There's this constant tug of war between internal teams responsible for maintaining privacy versus those who are trying to maximize the utility of the data they're collecting. And this is causing inefficiencies resulting in higher costs, lost revenue and margin, sometimes delays in product development and shipping, and missed opportunity. With new compliance laws like the GDPR and CCPA, and fines from government regulators amounting to over $400 million in 2019 alone, data privacy and risk officers are charged with protecting PII. Now, most companies want to evolve, but they're struggling to figure out how. All these data protection rules are stifling innovation. If you want to be data-driven and customer-centric, but can't freely share this valuable data with your internal teams or external collaboration partners, you're not alone. That's because the Amazons, the Apples, and the Googles of the world have a secret weapon they haven't advertised and don't want others to know about. It's a game changer and one that will put you on a level playing field to innovate, train your AI, and collaborate with teams, all while keeping your customer data completely private and secure. Their secret? It's synthetic data, and it's changing the way teams operate. For those of you who are in the know, you're already aware of its growing popularity. More and more news outlets are starting to pick up on this. Gartner did as well. They recently added synthetic data to their hype cycle. Synthetic data is artificially manufactured through unsupervised machine learning. It looks and feels like real data, but without any of the privacy risk. So to better explain, let's begin with these images. Now, believe it or not, both of the large images here, they're synthetic, completely fake and made up, and generated by a machine learning model. A machine studied thousands of real faces, like the tiny images you see in the background, to learn all the features and structures of real human faces, and then generated these two synthetic images automatically. They appear just as real and as authentic as human faces. Now, while NVIDIA does this with images, at Mostly AI, we do the same thing with structured and privacy-sensitive data. So think about your patient data, health information, financial records, user information, basically anything that's in structured format. So numerical data, categories, timestamped events, all get fed into our platform. The synthetic data engine is configured fully automatically and creates a generative neural net structure, which is then trained on your original data. And it's so powerful, it automatically learns all the structures, all the correlations, and all the time dependencies of your existing data sets. And once this training is complete, it generates new synthetic patients from scratch, which have the same structure, correlations, and health issues, just like your original data. And here's the cool part. The platform automatically produces a report breaking down the correlations, the distributions, even the accuracy and the privacy. There is no other solution on the market that provides the same level of quality with data privacy guarantees. Synthetic data empowers you to retain full value of your classified data. So regardless of if it's public, internal, confidential, or restricted, synthetic data is truly anonymous yet highly realistic, and it cannot be reverse engineered, giving you confidence to share synthetic versions of your privacy-sensitive data you never would have otherwise, with people in and out of your organization. But the most important part here is this. I'm not talking about a theoretical concept. Our platform is already deployed with international companies in healthcare, finance, and insurance, which include some of the largest and most innovative organizations around the world. They're using computer-generated data that looks and feels like real data to conduct AI training, analytics, and innovation faster, cheaper, and without any re-identification risk. So what does this mean in practical terms? I'll give you 3 quick examples. First, this is one we've all dealt with before. It takes too darn long to access your data. By the time a request is made for privacy-sensitive data, it's approved, and the data is anonymized, masked, or sanitized. Sometimes weeks or months have passed. In fact, some of our customers told us it used to take them 6 to 8 months to get access to confidential or restricted data. Now, because synthetic data can quickly be produced and doesn't require compliance controls or approval for sharing, they've shrunk this time period from months down to days, meaning teams are accessing data faster to conduct analytics, migrate to the cloud, and conduct product testing and development, saving our customers time and money that's freed up to handle other pressing issues. Number 2, here's another common use case, unlocking your data assets. Sometimes teams need to unlock data to train their AI models and conduct analytics, right? But they only have access to a small slice of their raw and privacy-sensitive data, which makes sense, right? With HIPAA compliance, this data needs to be protected and can't easily be shared. But this causes a major issue for machine learning and analytics personnel who rely on this data to do their jobs. We solve this problem. Healthcare organizations are generating synthetic data to train their machine learning models, which is resulting in better products for their customers, better tools for their employees, reduced healthcare costs for their patients, and improved analytics, which is driving better business outcomes. And third, think your typical third-party collaborations and POCs. We started working with a major healthcare company who initially generated synthetic data to test the efficacy of a third-party analytics vendor. Now, dummy data wouldn't allow them to test the product appropriately, but they couldn't share production or privacy-sensitive data. So they leveraged Mostly AI to generate highly realistic data sets to test this third-party analytics tool. We helped them speed up this POC process by over 2 months, and they hit their goal of purchasing and onboarding this new vendor ahead of schedule. And although we're recognized as the global market leader in big data anonymization, you don't need to take my word for it. CB Insights considers us the future of data security. And my colleague Alexandra here pitched our solution in Vegas and won the Startup Challenge at Money 2020. Oh yeah, I should have mentioned this earlier, but our synthetic data engine can be installed on-prem or in the cloud to empower you with the same tools and technology as the world's most powerful organizations. If you'd like to remove the handcuffs from your data and privacy officers, synthetic data is your answer. I'm Jeffrey Dobin from Mostly AI. If you want to see how synthetic data can help your organization create fresh, unmasked data sets that are truly anonymous, privacy compliant, and free to share, let's get you set up with a trial license, and we'll show you how.
Awesome, Jeffrey. Thank you. Really great work there, breaking down that balance between privacy and utility and the ability of synthetic data to step in and provide a solution to that problem. Now, we are getting plenty of questions from the audience. One that I think is interesting here says, I'm really intrigued by the synthetic data idea, but there seems to be a chicken egg problem here. We can't share our production data with you, so how can you possibly generate similar data if you don't know what our data looks like?
That's a great question and a really good point. The quick answer to that is, and I probably could have done a better job in explaining this, is we don't actually ever see your raw data or your synthetic data. Because our platform is installed on your premises, in your environment, so typically, or in your cloud, but either way, our platform is installed in your environment, and you upload the data into the software. So we never see the raw data. And then the synthetic data is generated, and then you have that to share freely however you wish, which avoids the chicken and egg problem. If you had to share the data with us, to your exact point, that's a good question, then how could we possibly help synthesize it? Because you can't share it anyway, right? You're dealing with PII and HIPAA compliance. But yeah, that's how we solve that problem.
Very interesting. Now, I got one more here. We have about 4 minutes left in the time here. Are there any minimum or maximum data size requirements for training the model or generating new data sets?
Yeah, good question. There aren't any hard and fast rules. On one end of the spectrum, from a maximum side, we haven't encountered a data set that's too large, which is good news. On the opposite end of the spectrum, in terms of minimal data size requirements, we like to see, if you think of it in a table format in a CSV, a minimum of 10,000 rows, just because the larger the data set, the better, and the more accurate our product will be in producing synthetic data. You can synthesize smaller data sets, but our recommendation would be to start at data sets with 10,000 rows or more.
Okay. Very interesting. Great. Well, Jeffrey, thanks again for your presentation. And I think now I'll ask you to turn off your video, stop your screen share, and we will turn it over to Leon Lerman, the CEO of Cynerio. Leon, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, William. And good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen now. My name is Leon Lerman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cynerio. In Cynerio, we're specifically focused on protecting connected medical devices and healthcare IoT in healthcare. So a little bit about the company. We do only healthcare. We don't do any other verticals, kind of like try to be best of breed in one field. We're backed by VCs in the healthcare, cyber, and medical device domains. We're currently deployed in more than 35 hospitals globally. Most of them are in the US, monitoring more than 500,000 devices on a daily basis. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing in the healthcare IoT space. So there have been quite a lot of increase in the space in the last couple of years as healthcare is becoming more connected. Devices are now sending more data to the EMRs and to the various applications doctors are using to allow them automation and real-time decision making. That's basically created a new category that is now being called IoMT, which stands for Internet of Medical Things. which basically includes all the network entities that are taking part in providing patient care. So those are some of the stats that we collected from our customer base and from other sources. I think the interesting data stat here is that today we're seeing that 25% out of the total IT devices that hospitals have are IoMT. So that's, and this is of course only expected to increase following the COVID-19 period, where we're seeing a lot more devices getting into healthcare, a lot of bring your own device has also been adopted more recently. And one of the challenges around that is that, you know, the smarter your hospital is, the higher the cybersecurity threat is, as a lot of those devices were not built with security in mind and pose a major security risk, and we'll talk about it. Some of the IoMT trends that we're seeing and some of the shifts that we're seeing. So first of all, in terms of the primary concern of the CISOs that we talk to, you know, traditionally in healthcare, healthcare is very much compliance driven, very much patient data driven. But when we talk about IoMT, we see that the main concern is actually not data safety, but it's actually patient safety, because a lot of those devices are being used to provide patient care. A lot of them provide doses, and even a basic attack could make them come to a halt and potentially harm patients. And this is the number one priority, not just from the CISO's level, but sometimes and very often also from the board level and the CEO level in the organization. In terms of risk containment, we've seen this shift from closed networks, where devices were either not connected or just connected within the hospital, and we're seeing a lot more openness and shift to the cloud. Seeing various services like hosted EMRs, to which devices are communicating to, sending data, different cloud services such as hosted PAC systems for radiology and cardiology, where the devices are communicating a lot more to the cloud. Of course, that also increases the risk and the need for visibility and security. In terms of a driving force, so it's a lot more board focused and a lot more strategic, other than just audits and compliance and kind of like a check the box approach that we've kind of like seen in some other disciplines and some other domains in healthcare. So we've seen examples when we talk to clients that had IoMT projects, is where CEOs were reading reports about critical vulnerabilities on devices, and then had, you know, a board level discussion to understand how that should be addressed. And the last thing, in terms of types of attacks, traditionally, when the threat to medical devices was considered, it was a lot about what if a nation-sponsored attack will hack into an IV pump, change the dose of the dispensed medication, and potentially kill a patient or a VIP patient. And even though that's a very frightening scenario, it's not that it happened, at least not on a very kind of like reported, I would say, way to really be too concerned about it. But the shift that happened after WannaCry has happened about 2 years ago, and then some of the subsequent attacks, such as Orange Worm, NotPetya, and others, is because those devices are so vulnerable. Those MRI machines, IV pumps, patient monitors, blood gas analyzers, etc., running operating systems such as Windows 7, Windows XP, sometimes even lower, older version operating systems. They use some obsolete communication protocols such as HL7, DICOM, ASTM, that were typically do not support encryption by default, do not support authentication to Active Directory. So they're very much susceptible to everyday attacks like ransomware, that some of my colleagues here talked about in the previous presentations that are not specifically targeting medical devices. They're targeting weakened operating systems, which medical devices happen to have, because there's a very long life cycle to kind of like update those and refresh them. So those are kind of like some of the trends we're seeing. In terms of the challenges specifically in the healthcare organization, I would say there are two types of challenges. There's first of all, a technical challenge with most of the organizations don't even know how many devices they have. They don't have visibility of where the devices are, how are they connecting to the network. It's very difficult to understand what's the risk they pose towards the organization, which vulnerabilities do they have, what's the impact of those vulnerabilities on patient care, on data confidentiality, on service availability. And the last challenge is that a lot of the standard IT tools that are currently being used are not applicable for the medical devices and the healthcare IoT. For example, if you want to install an antivirus or any other endpoint protection software on a medical device, the FDA will not prevent you from doing that. But a lot of the device manufacturers will say, well, if you do that, you will have no warranty. We'll void your warranty because the software you're installing could potentially interfere with the clinical function of the device. And this is something that a lot of organizations, a lot of hospitals are then reluctant to do. And hence a dedicated approach is needed. The second type of challenge is more of a business challenge. When we talk about IoMT security or medical device security, it's not just IT, but you also have biomed that is involved. Biomedical engineering, who are kind of like the experts on the medical device, are responsible for their operation, maintenance, and any type of updates. So while IT understands really well the security aspects, but don't really familiar too much or work on a daily basis with the medical devices, biomed understands the medical devices really well, but typically are not dealing with the security issues on a daily basis. And this requires collaboration for the project to be successful, which is very often challenging because the reporting structure is very often different. Biomed typically reports to facilities or supply chain, and this collaboration is not trivial. Also, in terms of alignment with business goals, as we discussed, medical devices are critical for patient safety and service availability. But the challenge is that when you start building your security program, it's very difficult to map the IT actions that you do, like segmentation, like patching, like isolation, into business goals such as patient safety, data confidentiality. So there's a challenge of bridging this gap, and how do you really make sure as an IT that you are aligning to the business goals. And the last thing is the remediation, which is the first approach when you talk about devices is do no harm. You don't want to do any damage, as those devices are critical and a mistake could be critical. So how do you remediate? How do you mitigate with keeping that in mind? In terms of how Cynerio sees our vision and how do we see the market evolving? So today in the traditional IT space, there's IT security space. There's a lot of solutions, right? You have solutions for forensics and asset management and vulnerability management and encryption key management and segmentation and risk analysis and many other things. Now, as the IoMT footprint and the hospital will grow, many of those challenges and problems that IT are facing with the IT ecosystem will become very much relevant for the IoMT ecosystem. So all those solutions eventually will need to be adapted and be applied for the IoMT ecosystem. And this is exactly what we why we exist, basically, and the offering that we provide to address all those IT needs for the IoMT ecosystem. The start, as what we're seeing right now in the market, is some basic needs such as visibility, having some asset management in place, inventory, doing some basic risk analytics to understand the different vulnerabilities and their impact. But as the time goes by, there'll be more and more needs that will need to be addressed. And this is what we do. We provide those IT solutions for the IoMT, including different solutions like anomaly detection, compliance solutions, providing real-time alerts about security incidents, helping with device inventory, helping with segmentation, which we'll touch upon specifically in a couple of slides, utilization information, applying policies on the devices, CASB, cloud security, cloud access security brokers, as more devices are now communicating to the cloud. And more to come as this industry will mature and will require more solutions. So how does our platform work? We are agentless solution, so you don't have to install anything on the devices themselves. We're also a passive solution, so we're not in line and we're only getting a copy of the traffic. So we typically connect to the core switch or switches of the hospital. We're getting a span port of this core switch, and then the traffic gets into our platform, which consists from two main parts. The first one is the collector that is installed on the hospital's network. Basically, we're in the collector, we're doing deep packet inspection, we're parsing all the specific healthcare protocols, the HL7s, DICOMs, ASTMs, POCT1s. We are parsing over 100 unique healthcare protocols, extracting information from them, and then sending anonymized metadata into the cloud, where we use machine learning to essentially provide all the different capabilities that we discussed, the visibility, the risk analytics, monitoring, anomaly detection, and of course, prevention through segmentation. I'd like to highlight specifically the virtual segmentation capability. I believe this is important because when we talk about medical devices and remediation, there are really two main things that as a hospital information security you can do. The first one is apply a patch if such is available. Now, the challenge is in most cases, the patch is not available because the hospitals rely on device manufacturers to create those patches, and it's quite a long process. And because there's quite a lot of testing that needs to be done to make sure the patch is good to apply. The second thing that can be done is really applying a compensating control. So limiting the attack surface and making sure the devices are only communicating with the network entities they should be. The challenge with that, and by talking with quite a few hospitals, those segmentation projects tend to take a lot of time, sometimes 18 months and even longer for a relatively medium-sized health system. Because of two reasons. The first one, it's very difficult to get visibility and really map all the different communications of what devices should be having. And the second is the concern to break something, to do no harm. If you break something and you will disrupt one of the workflows that in which the devices take part in, that this could have a critical impact on the operations, and IT teams are very much reluctant to do that. And this is why we introduce our virtual segmentation capability, where essentially what we do is initially we discover all the different devices. We're then mapping all their communications, understanding which communications they should have and which communications they shouldn't. And then we add a validation and optimization step. So instead of taking this policy that we created and automatically pushing it to the firewall or to the NAC to enforce the segmentation, we monitor the policy for violations and will alert the security team every time there is a violation, with explaining what the violation is and how it can be fixed. The security team then can review the violation and decide either they want to whitelist it or they want it shouldn't be happening, and they can fix and understand why how to prevent this violation from happening. once the violations were optimized and resolved, our solution will monitor for a period of time, depends on the time of the type of the device, and will tell the customer when it is safe to actually push the policy into the firewall, the NAC, or the networking equipment. In this way, with this validation and optimization step, it is a lot safer to push the policy, and it can be done a lot quicker. So our customers actually complete segmentation projects within 2.5 months instead of waiting for more than 1.5 years, because they have this confidence and they have this visibility into what should be done. To summarize, why Cynerio and why our approach differs than some of the other approaches, are more of a generic approach. So first of all, we're medical first. As I discussed, I believe that this space is now becoming big enough and is very specific and requires a deep understanding of the healthcare protocols, deep understanding of the medical workflows, and the different personas in the hospital to have a tailor-made solution that will address all those concerns that we talked about in an optimized way. Our ability to align IT risk with leadership business goals, where because we're healthcare specific, because we're medical first, we're able to translate terms like patient safety into the specific IT actions and IT vulnerabilities that are currently exist on devices, and then helping organizations answer questions like, how am I doing in terms of patient safety? Did I improve over the last couple of weeks or a couple of months in terms of my level of patient safety? We believe in actionable visibility. So everything that we show or any risk that we identify needs to be able to be, there is an action that needs to be done based on it. Either it's segmentation or network isolation, etc. We're fully integrated, so we believe that we need to integrate with all the different workflows that hospitals currently have, and integrate with all the relevant IT tools that hospitals have. So if a hospital has a firewall, the firewall today is being used for policies for IT, but the firewall works on an IP level, so they're able to see an IP address. They don't necessarily know that behind the IP address there is an MRI machine. We have this information. We can feed this information to the firewall or the NAC, make them medical device aware, allowing the organization to configure security policies on the medical devices as well. And we're fully customizable. We understand there are different roles in the organization. There are C-levels that require more of a summary information. There's biomed, who typically require utilization information and more operational insights. And of course, there's IT security, who needs more risk-related, risk mitigation information. We can customize it to fit all the needs of all the different parties in the organization. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions. And for all the audience, the ones that are interested in learning more, feel free to reach out. More than happy to jump on a demo and see how we can help. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Leon. We'll take one question here from the audience. I think this is a good one. It's kind of a long question. I'll do my best to summarize it. Hospitals are basically in the middle of fighting the coronavirus right now. We know that this can be a chaotic time for hospitals, and especially a time in which we're seeing an influx of potential new medical devices, particularly connected ventilator devices. And is it still possible to keep an accurate repository of devices on the network to monitor traffic, to spot anomalies in the midst of what could be conceptualized as network chaos? And so the question is that possible? And sort of what are you seeing?
So that's a great question, and the answer is yes, it is possible. But I think this is the one of the reasons why automation is required to keep track. A lot of the device inventory up until now was done manually, and that was possible while the number of devices was controlled. And relatively limited, and the changes of devices going online, offline was also controlled. And as you mentioned, right now it's becoming more difficult, and automation is required to keep track, and the tools are available to do that. So the answer is yes.
Great. Wonderful. Perfect timing. And thanks again, Leon. And I'll ask you to just close your video and stop your screen share there for a second.
Yep. Thank you.
Oops. And we'll go ahead and conclude our demo day today. I just want to say thanks again to Mike, Doug, Jeffrey, and Leon for presenting. Once again, thanks again to everyone who joined us today and everyone who stayed on the call. As a follow-up, we're going to send you all a recap email which summarizes this demo day and a short feedback form that you can use to request a one-on-one follow-up with any of the companies that presented today. You know, if you do want to reach out to them and connect with one of the companies, feel free to reach out to me directly. If you're interested in the open innovation services that SOSA offers, also feel free to reach out to me, and hope to see you at our next demo day. Have a nice day, stay healthy, and as always, stay secure. Thanks, everyone.